From beautiful, romantic affairs that spiral into obsession and sheer violence to clandestine affairs that morph into nightmares, these stories serve as cautionary reminders that love can sometimes lead down a path fraught with peril. On the other hand, Valentine's Day is a day traditionally associated with love, romance, and heartfelt gestures. But what happens when the sweetness of this day turns sinister? When love stories take a chilling turn into the realm of true horror? Brace yourselves for a journey into the scary true Valentine's Day horror stories. I still remember when I first met Jake. Oh, he was such a great guy, and we hit it off immediately. You can't blame me. I mean, I was still young then, say in my early 20s, so I think it was easier to fall hard for him. I was head over heels with him, and so it only took us a month to decide to move in together. It seemed like the perfect relationship and the right thing to do. Of course, my friends all told me that we were moving too fast and that I should take more time to get to know him, but I didn't want to listen. I felt Jake was a total gentleman and that he would take care of me. If only I had listened to them. It didn't take long for everything to go bad. Jake started out so kind and understanding, like a real gentleman, but somehow, after our dating got a whole lot serious, he changed completely. He became a totally different person. He was a psychopath and controlling beast. At first it was smaller things. He would always decide what we were going to do and how we were going to do it. He would never listen to any of my suggestions or opinions, but that's not all. He became crazily jealous and overly protective too. Jake would practically go on a rampage anytime another guy even glanced in my direction. Sometimes I would have to stop him from attacking some random guy in a bar just because he thought the guy was staring at me. And when I tried to talk about it, he would tell me it was my fault and that I was asking for attention from those guys. It was absolutely ridiculous. It was even worse when I went somewhere without him. Jake would snap and accuse me of cheating. He would take my phone to go through my messages and calls just to be sure who I was with. If I didn't call or message him, even if I was just out with friends or at my family's house, when I got back, he would hit me. He was really scary when he was mad too. Sometimes I was even afraid that he would actually attack me with a knife or any metal. He became so jealous that it was incredibly difficult to do anything apart from him. He was a controlling beast. I felt my life was caged. Then one night on Valentine's Day, my friends invited me for a girls' night out to celebrate a friend's birthday. I didn't know what I should do at first, since it was Valentine's Day. But Jake and I hadn't really made any plans, and he was still at work while I was at home all alone. So I finally made up my mind to go out with my friends and deal with Jake being upset later. I really wanted some time away from him, but in any case, I made sure to text Jake that I was going out, and then I tried to put him out of my mind for the rest of the night. I just wanted to have some space away from Jake and have a fun-filled night with my friends for once without him ruining everything. But of course, that wasn't going to happen. Throughout the night, while my friends and I were at a bar, Jake texted me nonstop. I didn't reply to any of his messages, and then he went on to start calling, and when I did respond, he started getting completely freaked out and yelled at me. "Where are you? I know you're cheating on me, you bastard." I finally just decided to ignore him and end the call. I knew I was going to have to deal with everything later, but I didn't want to put up with it at that moment. Then he kept calling my phone nonstop. After the first couple of calls, I put my phone on Do Not Disturb because I was so tired of Jake trying to control my life. I decided that I would finish out my night, but I was seriously considering breaking up with him at that point. The problem was that I knew it wouldn't be easy. I tried as possible as I could to have a good time with my friends, but when it was time to head home, I was so scared I knew Jake was going to completely blow up at me. It was the longest I had ever gone without texting or calling him back, and I didn't know what he was going to do to me. My friends tried to calm me down and told me that I could grab some clothes and spend the night with them if I needed to. That seemed like a good idea to me, but I still had to break up with Jake first. So my friends dropped me off in front of the house and waited for me outside while I slowly walked up to the front door. I was still scared out of my mind, but I was determined to go through with it. I couldn't keep letting Jake control my whole life. When I got to the door, I paused for a second to psych myself up. I figured that I would go in and grab my clothes first, and then I would break up with Jake right before I left. I didn't want to give him any time to react. After a final deep breath, I went to open the door. As soon as I opened the door, I found Jake standing directly in the doorway. "Jake, what are you?" And before I could finish, he grabbed me and yanked me inside, slamming the door behind me. I didn't even have the time to react. I immediately pushed him away from me and ran to my room to grab some clothes. He was a complete psychopath. I screamed at him and told him that I didn't want to be with him anymore, but that just made him snap even more. He started breaking things and punching holes in the walls while he screamed at me, saying, "You're not going to get away with this. You can't leave me. I won't let you." He was acting so scary, but I was so fed up with him that I started cursing at him and telling him that it was all his fault. But that just made him go even more crazy. He was going so crazy that I actually thought he might try to kill me, and I was scared to my spine. I took up some courage, ran out of the house, and jumped into my friend's car as I heard shouting still coming from inside. I screamed at my friend to get the hell out of there, and she started pulling out of the driveway as fast as she could. And just when I thought I was safe, Jake came running like a bat out of hell and jumped onto the car. He started hacking at the car with a knife. He had completely lost his mind. He was stabbing like a maniac. His knife punctured the roof and hit the doors. He was trying everything he could to get at us. My friend tried to swerve and shake him off, but he still wouldn't let go. Luckily for us, my friend came up with a brilliant idea and stepped on the brakes of the car. That made him lose control and grip of the car, and he fell to the ground so hard. That was how I got out of that abusive relationship, and that was how my Valentine's Day turned out to be. The weirdo serial killer. My story is kind of weird to tell. It took place in high school. This was a very creepy Valentine's Day experience that ruined the idea of romance for me for so many years. In my senior year, I started dating a girl who was only a junior. The reality was that I was young for my grade, just barely turning 17, and she was old for her grade, going on 16. We were 2 grades apart, but really only had less than a year of difference in age. My girlfriend's name is Ciara. Ciara and I weren't really supposed to be dating. She was a good girl and came from a good family, but we just clicked and liked spending time together. Her parents thought I was a bad influence, and they really were put off by my being a senior. There was no one explaining the actual linear timeline of us only being 11 months apart. They just didn't care. To them, I was just bad news from start to finish. However, that part really didn't bother me. In fact, it probably made Kira want to hang out with me even more. As a teenager, my parents were barely around, and when they weren't really interested in what I was doing. Ciara, on the other hand, was under what I would call lock and key. Her parents monitored her pretty well. This was before cell phones, so it was somewhat limited to what we had to do to be sneaky. I'd leave my house, take the back roads to the neighborhoods, then kill my engine, and park my truck just a block up from her house. I'd stroll down the hill and stop just up from her house, and Kira would usually be waiting for me. We would both take a walk to where I parked my truck, and we would head out for the night. There was a place just outside of town that's kind of like a big parking lot in the middle of nowhere. It was the rec lot. A lot of people used it to offload their quads and snowmobiles, depending on the season. It's Valentine's Day, and I believe it fell on a Friday. Ciara and I were keen to celebrate too. I went to pick her up at the usual spot, the usual routine, except that this time I had a bouquet of flowers, a box of chocolate, a handwritten card, and even a teddy bear and a balloon. I had never bought anything like this for a girl before, so I kind of let that all out, obviously. We got to our spot and exchanged gifts. We didn't do it at school because she couldn't risk bringing flowers or anything like that home. We stayed at the back of my truck and everything started to get hot and heavy. The back seat of my Blazer was perpetually laid down flat, so we did have as much room as possible. After an hour of kissing and heavy petting, things started to get more serious. Clothes started to come off and all of that stuff. Things move a little forward. Sierra ends up on top of me as she takes her shirt off and then looks up straight through the windscreen, and immediately she freezes. "I think there's somebody over there," she says to me. Sierra and I spent a lot of time together, so we would mess with each other all the time. I quickly assumed that that was what she was trying to do now, and I said, "Oh yeah, does he like what he sees?" However, Sierra covered herself up and started to panic, and that's when I realized that she wasn't messing around. I rolled her over, told her to get dressed, and then yanked on my jeans. The whole time I'm doing this, I'm staring through the windscreen. Far off, all the way on the other side of the parking lot, it looks like there's just someone standing there. I can faintly see a silhouette by the light of the moon, but it's not enough for me to be sure. I didn't have a gun or anything, we were just kids, but I did have a crowbar that I kept in the back and, of course, a torchlight. I get myself together, and just as I reach for the door handle, we can hear some hollering outside. I froze immediately. Honestly, I wasn't feeling very brave to begin with, and now that the guy was screaming, I had no interest in getting out of the car. Instead, I hit the lock. We hunkered down with the big blanket that I had and waited. The guy let out a few more shrieks that ripped across the parking lot and started pacing back and forth. And it became clearer that someone was really there. Part of me had been hoping it was just some weird shadow from the moon, but that wasn't the case. This guy looked agitated and sounded even crazier. Sierra reminded me that we had the key, that we could just speed out of there, and I realized that was the best move. This guy was obviously trying to mess with us, maybe even something worse, so I made the decision that it was time to go. I start creeping into the front seat, exposing myself to the moonlight and therefore becoming visible. Suddenly, something strange happens. I watch as the guy stops pacing and then just runs off into the tree line. This is spooky, because the town is a good 5 or 8 miles away, but it's a relief more than anything, honestly. I whisper to Sierra that he left, but she's not having it at first. We spent countless evenings hanging around this parking lot, and we've never seen a soul. For there to be a grown man stalking around the perimeter, this is just something more than weird. I did my best to calm her down, and after a while, everything seemed to go back to normal. We didn't hear any more yelling, and we no longer saw the guy. We told ourselves the story that he was just some local drunk stumbling his way back to town. We went back to the business we had going before the whole drama, and then promptly passed out in the back seat. It was only 2:30 or so in the morning, so we had a little time before I had to get her home. I hadn't been asleep for more than 15 minutes when I heard something that I couldn't place. It's so strange that I cracked my eyes open. My first thought is that the shouting guy has returned, and he's sculling around the outside of my Blazer. I looked back and forth between the windows until I saw it. The rolling shadow of something passing along the backside of the truck. It glides off before coming by again, this time in the opposite direction. It's a car, there's no doubt about it. I feel a sense of relief because their headlights are not being sneaky, so I assume whoever is driving is a kid like me. I check the clock and watch the car roll on by and then try to get a few more minutes of sleep. But just as I close my eyes, someone bangs on the back of my Blazer so hard that I think it's going to shatter. My eyes bug out and my heart stops. Again, my mind returns to that weirdo from earlier. I remember the car driving by and getting hopeful for a second that some kids were just pranking us. Maybe this whole thing has been a prank itself. But however, it turns out to be the opposite. Sierra asked me what's going on, being fully awake from all the commotion. And before I could answer her, a man shouted from the outside, "Get out of the car. It's Sierra's dad, and we both know it," as I can feel all the hope and confidence in our chests deflate in a second. We huddled together, terrified of whatever consequence waited for us outside. I figured he'd have a gun, maybe a bat, or just a length of rope to tie me to the back bumper of his car and drag my stupid ass back to town. Sierra asked me what we should do, but the fear in her voice is all I can hear. I finished putting on the rest of my clothes, took a deep breath and told her to do the same. I'm going to buy some time by going out and talking with him. I step out and get hit by his high beams. I hear his car door slam and then footsteps on the way over. I brace myself for whatever is coming. If he's going to beat me up, I'll let him. I probably scared the guy half to death by taking his daughter out of the house in the middle of the night. He stops short, pushes me against the truck, and then starts talking to me. Who the hell do you think you are? You're lucky the sheriff isn't out here and he isn't pressing charges. He threw everything at me that you can imagine, from insults to threats. The guy never laid a finger on me. I apologized and agreed with everything he said until Kira finally climbed out the other side. Her dad looked at the both of us up and down and asked if we wanted to share any last words. I told Ciara I loved her, and she said the same, and she got in her dad's car. Her dad walked me up and down again, but this time his energy was a little different. He told me I'd never see her again, and then drove off back to town. I spent a good 45 minutes out there just trying to catch my breath. What a crazy night it turned out to be. From this weirdo serial killer looking guy to Ciara's father banging on my window, I literally couldn't believe what had all gone down. The road back to town sloped away from the parking lot, and I was in shock. I could actually see their headlights drifting further and further away, and I counted myself lucky to be alive at all between both incidents. And I never saw that weirdo again. What do you think about Valentine's Day? Let us know in the comments section below. But hey, being security conscious can help you escape the terror of home invasions. Yeah, go check out this video on your screen. Scary, true home invasion horror stories.